During the 1930s and 1940s, the story of Borley Rectory spread throughout England after terrifying phenomena occurred, causing much consternation. Undeniably, no matter how advanced science becomes, many supernatural and mysterious events remain inexplicable. Across the world, there are numerous places believed to be haunted by restless spirits, bringing mischief and misfortune to those associated with them. In England, many are familiar with Borley Rectory, dubbed the most haunted house in England. In this place, numerous haunting stories occurred, affecting many generations of its owners. Thanks to its notorious reputation, Borley Rectory has been featured in several horror films, notably The Banishing, revolving around a family mysteriously disappearing within its walls. Strange phenomena. Located in the small village of Borley in Essex, England, the mansion was built near Borley Church in 1862. The owner of the mansion was Reverend Henry Dawson Ellis Bull. Previously, the site was the location of a large mansion destroyed by fire in 1841. Reverend Henry renovated and expanded Borley to accommodate his family of 14 children. He moved to live in the mansion after being awarded a prestigious title. It is known that Borley Rectory was built on land belonging to the village church. Locals passed down many legends about the cruel events that had occurred there. Some ancient ghost experts spread stories that in 1362, a previous church had been built on the same land. A monk in this church had a romantic relationship with a nun from a nearby convent. After their unorthodox affair was discovered, the monk was executed, while the nun was bricked up alive in the convent wall until her death. This legend haunted the locals for generations, attributing any strange phenomena at the mansion to the lingering spirit of the nun. Many dismissed this as folklore, yet it significantly contributed to Borley Rectory's eerie reputation, making it a place to be avoided by all. The first strange phenomenon occurred around 1863 when some villagers heard footsteps in the Borley mansion. On July 28, 1900, Reverend Henry's four daughters claimed to have seen the ghost of a nun about 35 meters from the house at twilight. They attempted to communicate with the ghost, but it vanished as they approached. Over the next 4 decades, several other witnesses directly experienced terrifying incidents such as a phantom carriage driven by 2 headless coachmen. After the father's death, Reverend Harry Bull inherited the house. On June 9, 1928, when Reverend Harry Bull also passed away, the house once again became desolate. A year later, on October 2, Reverend Guy Eric Smith and his wife moved in. While cleaning a cupboard, Mrs. Smith discovered the skull of a young woman wrapped in brown paper. Shortly after, the Smith family reported to the authorities after continuously experiencing eerie phenomena in the mansion, such as hearing bells ringing despite the cut bell ropes, lights flickering in the windows, or mysterious footsteps. Mrs. Smith also claimed to have seen a 4-wheeled carriage at night. Out of fear, the Smith family contacted the Society for Psychical Research to report their unease and the supernatural phenomena they encountered. On June 12, 1929, when psychic researcher Harry Price visited the mansion, he witnessed stones flying, flower vases, and other objects falling inexplicably. This was considered a new type of phenomenon at Borley Rectory. Furthermore, a spiritual message appeared as a reflection, but when Price left the house, the message vanished. This led Mrs. Smith to suspect Price's conjuring abilities and firmly believe that he was the one behind the strange occurrences rather than any supernatural force. All of this pales in comparison to what happened to the next owners of Borley Rectory. Reverend Lionel Foyster, along with his wife and adopted daughter, moved into Borley in 1930. And what befell these two families was no exception with this one. Phenomena like window shattering, ringing bells, flying stones, walls covered in writing. His wife not only witnessed these phenomena but was also dragged out of bed while asleep, attacked by something horrible, and their daughter was often unexpectedly locked in rooms without locks. The Foister family also reached out to psychic investigators to try to contain the restless spirits disrupting their lives. Reverend Lionel performed exorcisms twice, but all proved ineffective. In fact, during the first attempt, he was assaulted by a fist-sized stone. Researcher Harry Price continued to investigate Borley Rectory even after the Foister family departed. He conducted seances and purportedly made contact with two spirits in the house. One identified herself as Marie Lair, a young French nun who had forsaken everything to come to England, enamored with a member of the Waldegrave family, the former owners of Borley in the 17th century. According to Harry Price, she was murdered and either buried or thrown down a well. The writings on the walls in the house were purportedly her cries for help. The second spirit that Harry Price claimed to have made contact with was named Sunex Amours, threatening to set fire to the rectory that very evening. However, this event did not occur until a year later, in 1939, when a devastating fire severely damaged the house. For over 150 years, the LaLaurie Mansion in New Orleans, USA, has been regarded as the most infamous and terrifying haunted location. It was once the home of the cruel Mistress Delphine LaLaurie, dubbed the most bloodthirsty mistress of Louisiana. Delphine LaLaurie, born around 1775, was one of 5 children of Barthélemy Louis McCarty, an Irish merchant. Her mother, Marie Jean, had been married twice before marrying Barthélemy. The family moved to New Orleans due to economic hardship in Ireland. LaLaurie was married 3 times in her life. On June 11, 1800, she married Don Ramon López de y Angulo, a high-ranking officer in the Spanish army residing in New Orleans. Shortly after their marriage, Don Ramon's career soared, as he was appointed the Spanish ambassador to the United States, enjoying a substantial salary for the time. With her husband's fame and fortune, LaLaurie's life became increasingly affluent, relying on his reputation and wealth. She acquired numerous properties, plantations, and slaves. The local elite admired and respected LaLaurie's business acumen and beauty. However, in 1804, Ramon suddenly fell ill with a mysterious disease and died in Spain, leaving LaLaurie a vast inheritance and a young daughter. In 1808, LaLaurie married Jean Blanc, a prominent banker. LaLaurie and Jean had 4 children together, but Jean died unexpectedly in 1816. After what seemed like a life of widowhood, LaLaurie married a doctor named Leonard Louis Nicolas LaLaurie. Leonard was much younger than LaLaurie, and there were rumors that he married her solely for her substantial wealth. In 1832, LaLaurie decided to purchase a mansion at 1140 Royal Street, where the nightmare truly began with the mistreatment of innocent slaves. LaLaurie was known as a wealthy slave owner, holding over 100 slaves. However, her cruelty extended beyond exploitation and physical abuse to grotesque experiments that horrified many. Her atrocities were investigated in 1828, 1829, and 1832, leading to her trial for her actions. Many neighbors witnessed slaves being hung and brutally beaten for minor offenses such as dropping items. A 12-year-old slave girl named Leah committed suicide by jumping off a roof due to Lalaurie's brutality, though it was dismissed as her carelessness. This incident reached the local judge, who punished Lalaurie with fines and forced her to release 9 slaves. Lalaurie's own daughters were subjected to abuse. On one occasion, when Lalaurie discovered her beloved children secretly giving food and clothing to slaves, she ruthlessly beat them. 2 of her daughters eventually left home to escape the abuse. Her younger husband, tired of her cruelty, moved out to live with a younger lover, further driving Lalaurie into madness. It is known that Lalaurie had a dedicated room for collecting and storing torture tools. In the 19th century, items like these could be acquired as easily as groceries are bought today, providing the opportunity for this wicked woman to become the most notorious murderer of her time. Her infamous torture device was an iron clamp used to grip the victim's neck. What's horrific is that as the victim struggled to breathe, the clamp would tighten, ensuring a slow, agonizing death that was unavoidable. To ensure her elderly cook, who had served her family for decades, wouldn't escape, Lalaurie chained her to the kitchen stove of the mansion. Ironically, the cook chose to end her life by igniting the stove, thereby turning the entire house to ashes. It was from this incident that Lalaurie's cruelty was fully exposed to the city of New Orleans. The revelation of the crime. The fire at Madame Delphine Lalaurie's mansion occurred on April 10, 1834. When the police arrived to control the fire, they discovered it originated from the kitchen and rushed in to extinguish it. Inside, they were greeted with the sight of a black female slave hanging upside down from the ceiling, horrifyingly, her feet mangled with chains piercing through. She desperately told the police that she had started the fire in the kitchen to attract attention for rescue. After extinguishing the fire, the police searched the entire house and found numerous horrifying sights. In the attic, many disabled slaves were chained to the walls or lying on the floor. Their lips sewn shut, some had their tongues cut off, rendering them unable to cry for help. Many slaves had died, and their bodies were contorted into shapes like crabs, butterflies, or a man victimized by strange gender reassignment surgeries. The surviving victims were immediately taken to the hospital but later died due to severe infections from their wounds. On that same night, the people of New Orleans were furious, determined to punish this demon disguised as a human. Police had to intervene, resulting in chaotic clashes. Seizing this opportunity, Lalaurie quickly fled. Despite clear evidence of Lalaurie's crimes, she managed to evade punishment due to the reputation and power of her husband. Almost no one knew what became of Madame Lalaurie afterward. Many believe she escaped to Alabama before heading to Paris, where she lived out the rest of her days in freedom. The Cursed House. After Lalaurie fled her home at 1140 Royal Street, the horrifying mansion remained abandoned for many years. Only when a new owner bought the house did he hear the desperate cries of tortured slaves. Haunted by this, he left the house after only 3 months. Some time later, the house became the residence of Jules Vine, a wealthy, eccentric recluse who lived there until his death in 1892. His body was found in a squalid, cramped condition inside a small dog crate. A collection of antiques and other valuable items hidden in the house were also discovered, yet no thief dared to touch them. Finally, the house was converted into a low-income housing complex. But residents' lives were constantly disrupted, and the area remained abandoned. Many claim to have seen a naked slave, shackled and then disappearing into thin air. Additionally, they spoke of finding traces of blood-soaked sacrifices of animals and children in the area. The house, situated on a 10-hectare estate in the town of Bartlesville, Oklahoma, USA, owned by Frank Labadie, is known as the most famous haunted house in the world. The eerie and chilling stories surrounding this house have piqued the curiosity of many, yet no one dares to spend a night there. The Mysterious Master. Frank Labadie, a slave trader in the city of Pittsburgh, Oklahoma, is the owner of this haunted house. After the passing of the 13th Amendment by the United States Congress in 1865, which declared all black slaves free, even those residing in seceding states, Labadie stubbornly continued to keep 200 black slaves working on his farm. It wasn't until numerous uprisings of black slaves in the South erupted demanding their freedom that Labadie hastily liquidated all his assets, keeping only his head chef, Ennis Parson, and his wife, Samantha, and relocating to the outskirts of Bartlesville, Oklahoma, where he purchased a vast plot of forested land to build a house. By 1889, Labadie's mansion was completed, quite grand and spacious. But since moving there, the Labadie couple hardly interacted with the surrounding community. Twice a month, they were only seen riding into town on horseback to purchase essential groceries. Even during the flood season of 1891, when the river waters rose, threatening to inundate the entire Bartlesville area, a kind neighbor rode over to warn Labadie, only for him to stand on his porch and utter, "Let my wife and me be." Late on June 24, 1893, after quarreling with his pregnant wife over suspicions of her infidelity with the black head chef, Ennis, and fearing that Samantha's unborn child was Ennis's, Labadie shot and killed Ennis. After disposing of Ennis, Labadie dug a grave to bury the victim's body right in the kitchen. Over a week later, while on one of his grocery runs into town, Labadie spread the word among the neighbors that the black slave had fled. Furthermore, when Samantha gave birth, despite the baby being white, Labadie drowned it in a nearby creek, burying the infant's body under mud. When neighbors questioned why Samantha never seemed to recover from childbirth, Labadie explained that his wife had miscarried. The mansion takes on a grim hue. After murdering the black slave Ennis and the newborn child, Labadie and his wife continued to live as if nothing had happened. They were seen even less frequently by their neighbors except for their trips into town for groceries. In all the summer activities in Bartlesville, the Labadie couple never participated. Every night, except for the dim light flickering from a room upstairs, Labadie's house was shrouded in darkness, earning it the nickname the Black Mansion. In June 1935, after several days of not seeing Labadie, some curious individuals went to his house, only to find him lying dead beneath the floorboards, his head smashed, his hand still clutching a revolver. Next to him, on the bed, lay the body of Samantha, also shot in the head. Both corpses were in an advanced state of decay. The police investigation concluded that Labadie had shot his wife before committing suicide. About 6 months after the Labadie couple's death, Tom Labadie, Frank's younger brother from Wyoming, came to claim the inheritance. On his first night, Tom heard footsteps, crying, screaming, and even gunshots. Thinking he was hallucinating due to his brother's death and exhausted from the long journey, Tom paid no heed. However, on the following nights, the phenomenon continued to occur, prompting Tom to pack his bags and rent a hotel room in the town of Bartlesville. Explaining to the neighbors, Tom simply said that his house was not adequately equipped, and moreover, he was not accustomed to cooking, so he preferred to stay elsewhere for convenience. Several weeks later, Tom put the house and land up for sale. A few people came to see it, but all of them thought it was too gloomy because there were quite a few large trees around the house. To make it sellable, Tom decided to hire someone to chop them down, but when they began to cut down the ancient pine trees, one of the lumberjacks was crushed to death by a falling tree. Not only that, when the interior decorator came to ask Tom about the color scheme for the walls in the living room, they found him face down in the ditch behind the house. When they pulled Tom up, he was already dead, but the most horrifying thing was right under the spot where Tom fell into the ditch, there was a small, decomposed skeleton. According to forensic experts, it was the skeleton of an infant. The discovery of the skeleton raised many questions about Samantha's pregnancy and the disappearance of Ennis, the African-American slave. Digging into suspicious places, the police found another skeleton buried right under the kitchen floor. A brass bracelet with the engraved name worn on the wrist of the skeleton identified it as Ennis, but since the Ballady couple were both deceased, the case was closed. From then on, the house was abandoned and gradually fell into disrepair over time. Neighbors reported seeing lights in the house on many nights, accompanied by sounds of crying. Some even claimed to have seen Ballady wandering around the house on a moonlit night. The persistent rumors over the years piqued the curiosity of Alex Sander, a journalist for the Oklahoma News. On September 3, 1951, Sander packed a backpack and set out for the house. That night he stayed there without incident, but in the morning, when he descended to the old dining room Ballady used, Sander found on the surface of the old broken table a half-drunk cup of coffee still steaming. Beside it was a glass jar containing coffee powder, labeled from the Dixie and Son store, manufactured since 1935, and a jar of sugar. Astonished, Sander hurriedly ran upstairs where he had slept, intending to take a photograph, but as soon as he entered the room, Sander saw a hook on the wall, hanging a worn-out coat even though there had been none of those items there the night before. All the neighbors confirmed that it was Ballady's coat because from the time the house was built until his death, every time he went grocery shopping, Ballady only wore this coat. Tim Cranker, a neighbor and witness at the crime scene investigation, confirmed that when the Labadie couple were found dead, among their clothes, there was no coat. The test results also showed that the coffee was made over 15 years ago, losing its aroma, and the sugar had solidified. After that incident, journalist Sander had to seek medical attention and undergo treatment for psychological disorders, while the haunted house to this day remains a tourist attraction, but no one dares to stay overnight.